All right, we're live. Welcome to episode 250. That is 250 of these live streams that I've done, working on comics, working on a lot of different comics. I think I started doing these in retrospect when I was working at, I think towards finishing two stories, book one. And then I think, I don't know, it's kind of a blur, but I know I did. Most of like the roughs for the entirety of Two Stories Book Two on live streams. And then got a publishing deal for Jacob's Apartment, had to work on that, was working on that, I think, during these live streams. I might be condensing too much into the live streams, but there's been a lot. And now I'm working on Not Death But Love, the strange supernatural story of Elizabeth Barrett Browning on these things. So I'm really happy with how these things have been coming out. And I hope you guys are too. And yeah, we'll see kind of how this goes. So today is an art stream. I'm going to be working on my graphic novel, Not Death But Love, the strange supernatural story of Elizabeth Barrett Browning, which is a supernatural, well, kind of like a, I was going to say supernatural. I'm still working on the pitch for this book. But the premise is it's basically like a story about Elizabeth Barrett Browning and Robert Barrett Browning, these two famous English poets, and particularly Elizabeth Barrett Browning's deep dive into the world of seances and spiritualism in the search to try to contact her dead brother, who died really tragically at sea, and how that kind of affects the relationships around her, how it affects Robert. And it's a really fascinating story. I usually don't collaborate with other people on comics. The two graphic novels that I've made so far are ones that I've written myself and illustrated myself. And the screenplay was just so freaking good. Like the story for this was so well written and so well done that I kind of decided to do it. So that's what I'm going to be working on tonight. In between, I might possibly reward myself with a game of Risk here or there. But at this point, my rule going forward is I need to tone at minimum 2 panels. And if I'm having good momentum, I'd like to do more than 2 panels. But I need to tone 2 before I'm allowed to kind of break and kind of do like a game of Risk or something like that. And ideally, maybe I'll get a little further than 2. Break, 2, break. And ideally, I'd like to get as far as I can on the toning of this page as I can tonight, because I have a lot of pages to do. And the page that I'm on right now is page 72 of over 200 pages that I need to deliver to my publisher. So we'll see how that goes. We'll also see if people show up. Seems like a fairly dead stream so far. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. Regardless, I got to get the work done. So, an indicator for you guys, if this is a Risk stream, right, you're going to not see this giant obnoxious logo that Corey Kerr teases me so often about. If it is not a Risk stream and it's an art stream, you're going to see this pow right there. This obnoxious, crazy logo. That I love, but it's also not a very reducible logo and breaks all sorts of graphic design rules because it's a little too complex. But I still love it. All right. So all of that being said, there's one more order of business to get to, a couple more orders of business to get to before we get into the art stuff. First off, before we get into the stream, if you are watching this after the fact, before the fact, please hit like. It takes 2 seconds. Just hit that button, and that does a lot to kind of share the stream and let people know that I exist and that the stream exists and that our community exists, which I think is a good thing. Aside from that, I should let you know who I am if you're just tuning in for the first time. I've been a graphic designer and illustrator for over 20 years. And I've been an art director for now over 8, which is kind of insane to think. So little over 8 years been art directing. And when I'm not art directing or doing graphic design or illustration, I'm working on graphic novels like Jacob's Apartment and Two Stories, which are the 2 graphic novels that I have currently out that I both wrote and illustrated. And both are very slice of life, independent type comic books in the vein of like Raw and the Undergrounds and Craig Thompson and like a lot of the more kind of like literary end of comics. So if you're interested in that, take a peek. I'll do the pitch. I'm not going to do the pitch for them because I play trailers for my books on breaks as these things go. If you're familiar with the stream, you'll know that. And I think that takes care of all orders of business, except I should also mention I do take super chats. So if you're watching the stream and there's a particular topic or thing of interest that you want me to address, I will prioritize all super chats. Of course, if I try to pay attention to chat as much as possible anyway, but it is a nice way to support the channel, especially considering this is episode 250. If you're watching this after the fact, you can also give super thanks. And then another way to support the channel is I now offer memberships on YouTube. There's only really one perk for members, so it's more of just a way to kind of throw in a couple bucks a month to support me. But whatever, you decide what's best for you, and if these streams and stuff like that have value for you. So that's all out of the way. All the orders of business and points of business are out of the way. Let's get into comics. So here is the main view of the page. So here you're going to be seeing, let me lower it a little bit. So you're going to be seeing me working on my crappy little Wacom tablet. Boom. It's dusty, right? It's got like marks all over it. This is an abused and bruised Wacom tablet. But you're going to see that, and it makes a funny little illusion because it's almost like I have a smaller body and a giant head, which is kind of funny. So here you're going to be seeing me, and then here you're going to be seeing the Photoshop file that I'm going to be toning. I worked on these pages yesterday, and I was listening to, I think, Adam Lohr's stream. I was listening to that on the way home as well. And I still need to catch up with Gary Hodges' last stream and some other people in the community. So if I haven't commented or whatever on anybody in our community's videos as of late, I have been drawing like a madman and trying to listen to as many as I can. Okay, we're going to get into some toning and we're going to talk. And I was thinking about a heavier topic today, but I think it'll be fun and I think it pertains to the kind of work that I do. Actually, I shouldn't say I think it'll be fun. I think it'll be a heavy conversation. But I wanted to actually talk a little bit about, I've been thinking about my friend's book. My friend Alan Noble just wrote a book called On Getting Out of Bed. And it was particularly written for Christians. So like it's not necessarily like a mainstream kind of book. I think it would be accessible for people who don't believe, but I think it's primarily written for people who actually believe the religious belief of Christianity. But it was interesting, and it brought up some interesting conversations that I've had personally with Alan, as well as conversations I've had with friends, and a hard question regarding depression that I think is valid and kind of worth kind of talking about. So I thought that might be something to mine for a topic. We'll see how far that goes and where the winds and my whims take me, as well as where the chat takes me. So again, if that's not a topic of interest to you, just let me know, and let me know what you want to talk about, and we can see if we can find something we're both interested in talking about. But till then, we're just going to start by talking about possibly a heavier conversation about depression, and a question that a lot of people aren't really fond of asking, but it's worth asking. It's like a really creepy question. So stay tuned. That's coming. Okay. Creepy questions about depression. And by the way, this book that I'm working on is a historical fiction book, but 2 stories, like the whole topic of that book is trying to destigmatize hard conversations about mental illness. And so it deals heavily with topics of like depression and stuff like that. So I feel like it's not entirely off topic to kind of bring up that conversation. So before we kind of dip into the topic, let's get a little bit set up. You're also going to hear the dogs bark in a few minutes because my wife had to go pick up her sister from the train. There's kind of some chaos on the train. I guess there was, I think somebody got murdered, which is kind of insane on the train. And so they had to like wait for the next train after kind of being like, I don't know. Anyhow, I guess we'll find out more details. But my point is, they'll be coming through the door a little bit later, God willing, and then we'll hopefully have my sister-in-law back safe, sound, and ready to go. So just acknowledging that early on. Okay, and that's about it. So we're actually going to get into toning these pages. So I have the different layers set up. I've already done the type pencils for each page, and so it's about kind of bringing it in and bringing in the tones. I also have page 71 pulled up so that I can pull from the colors on this as well. So you'll kind of see what the objective is. My objective is to kind of do this with this page. That's what I need to do. And then at some point we might pull color from the previous page, but I don't think we're going to get to colors today. Realistically, we're probably only going to get to shading. If you are up late and working on stuff, let me know what you're working on. I love hearing what people are working on while I'm working on art. That makes my day, and I love our community. And so, yeah, let's get into drawing and possibly the topic once we kind of have this all set up. So I'm going to make my colors. I like to use the rich black 50, 50, 50, 100. And I'm going to look at my light source. I think from what I recall, yes. Okay, so my light source is coming from a window that is actually behind this character on panel 1 on the right's head. So the light source is kind of coming from here. And so what we're going to be doing is kind of toning it roughly, not super technically, to kind of match said light source. I'll also pull this open because I realize there's a little bit more space on the screen than I think I was allowing for. Okay. How is everybody? Okay. So my friend wrote this really good book on getting out of bed. And the premise of it is kind of multiple angles, and I might butcher kind of the purpose of it. I could talk to Alan, and maybe Alan would want to go on Artcasters and just kind of talk about it, because I don't know if we've had somebody who writes books that are like theological or philosophical and not necessarily like like novels or something like that. So it's like a nonfiction genre that I don't know if we've ever had like a guest cover. So that might be cool if he'd be interested. Just to kind of have him discuss his book and stuff like that. But I don't know. Again, I don't know if our Artcast is like the ideal scenario for that, but I know that we've had writers on before, and so it might be interesting. But anyhow, so the book's a little complex, and I've only read it once. It's a very short book. It's a quick read comparatively. His other works are a lot heavier in kind of theological depth. Whereas this book was nice, short, sweet, and to the point. But the premise of it was the idea that that like basically, the old adage, like life is suffering. And like the whole purpose of the book is kind of saying that like that's sort of part of life. And sometimes the most diligent thing we can do as like believers, and again, like this isn't, I'm not trying to proselytize or anything like that, just talking about the book, is to kind of step forward in faith. And sometimes the most important decision you have to make as somebody who, particularly somebody who suffers from mental illness, from depression, from anxiety, from any sort of like mental issues, whether situational or biological, quite often the most important kind of decision that we have control over and can actually be like an act. He makes the argument that it can be an act of like worship to actually just get out of bed. Because there's definitely times, and the book makes a really good case of this, and I agree with it. There's definitely times where, as an adult, like if you're fortunate enough to have lived a life where you have not yet had a day where you didn't want to get out of bed, like, and I don't mean like, I don't want to get out of bed. I mean like you feel paralyzed and unable to bear the weight of the world. um, if you haven't experienced that, congratulations to you. You probably will. And the book makes a really solid case of that. And when you have those kind of moments, one of the hardest things to do in those moments is to have a reason for getting out of bed. So like when you're in the depths of despair, you can basically find yourself needing an anchor or something, like something that's a reason. And there's times in life where that reason seems almost distant or non-existent, and that's where, like, at least for me, depression has definitely had that impact on me in the past. And there's definitely been times where, even though my mind is like rationally not right, it seems very rational to be kind of depressed, and it seems kind of irrational that no one is like that people are getting out of bed, that they're choosing to kind of exist in this what when I'm in the depths of it, it'll be like this meager existence, right? It's a hard thing to talk about, but I'm gonna do my best. I'm much better at like writing about this kind of stuff. Talking about it really openly can be a little strange, but we're gonna try. And honestly, I think I have like one viewer right now, so hey, we're gonna talk together, just you and me. um, so, and also we're toning pages, so we're making good progress, right? So okay, so anyhow, the book is really good. The purpose of this wasn't to like go over the book. It was to actually bring up, like, so after reading the book, I know this is something that Alan has thought about a lot. I know that we've had conversations in the past, particularly like, I think we were talking about my depression a long time ago. And I think I had this conversation with him where I was saying one of the scariest things, right? When you are depressed, and then even when you come out of it, one of the scariest things in the world is the realization, and this may not be a popular thing to say, that you might actually not be crazy. Like, and so the point being, like, it's kind of comforting to think you might not be crazy, but it's also kind of comforting if you're a person who deals with depression to realize, oh, this is just depression, right? This is just kind of an issue. Like, this is the way my brain works. My brain doesn't, see things correctly, right? But there's this other angle, and the book touches on this a little bit, but I think it's an interesting question, and I think about it a lot. And I think about a lot of stuff like this as an artist. And for one thing, because I write about a lot of stuff like this. But I also think, like, as an artist, you're kind of sensitive and slightly empathetic to the world. Like, we're kind of fragile artists. Like, artists are a little fragile. And maybe you're the exceptional artist who doesn't have like a very rich amount of emotions, which is fine, right? Like, actually, honestly, your life is probably much more pleasant. But for me, so it's such an interesting topic, and I haven't rehearsed this or anything, so this is gonna be kind of piecing together my thoughts as we work. But like, one of the scarier things about depression that can also be true is sometimes you're not wrong. And that's kind of like the I think the thing we're all afraid of. And yet I think sometimes life is unbearable, and it is kind of important to have a conversation with yourself, or like to have a sit down and think, why should I get out of bed? Right. And now, when I'm saying this, I am not making any statement that the choice not to, like the choice not to go on or continue, is a valid one. That's an irrational choice. But life sometimes does beg the question of like, why should, we go through all this suffering, or all this misery, or kind of delay the inevitable death that awaits us all, right? It can get really dark. And I think that question is a really important one, because there are definitely times in life where your situations might validly be pretty freaking miserable, right? Um, and like, I think that quite often in our society, and Alan makes a good case slightly of this in the book too. And this is something I've thought for a while, where it's like our society is very much like a, at least in capitalism, and I'm not an anti-capitalist. I want to be clear about that. I believe in like socialized systems for things that don't work with the profit motive. But in general, I think, capitalism, as difficult as it can be sometimes, is kind of like one of the better better systems that we have. If a better one comes along, I'd be really excited about it, but I haven't seen one. But the downside of the system we live in, at least in the US, is we're kind of in a system where people find their value. This is going to be a really weird topic. I'll get like one view after this is over, but that's okay. I'm not trying to be like a YouTube superstar here. So I feel like society has this value on us based on what we can deliver, and and that's pretty okay. Like in a capitalistic system, that works all well and good. It motivates people to like do good work. It motivates people to innovate. It gives us really nice things. It makes us be contributing to society in general. But I feel like the structure of a lot of our societies is based on like, what can you do for me? And it's kind of like, not what can you do for me? It's more like society in general is telling every individual, what can you contribute, right? And the value of people is quite often measured by that contribution. So it's like, if you're, like if you're a human being, the value of human beings in our society, and I'm not saying for everyone, but just in general, there's this feeling that the value is very much based on what you can contribute, what you can give. Like, even the justification for people is quite often given by like, well, these people contribute this, and these people contribute this, and like, like janitors are important because janitors keep things clean, and food preparers are important because they prepare food, and like we all need food to eat, and like farmers are important because they're growing food, and artists are important because they're entertaining people, and like it's all this importance based on measurable values that can be exchanged for currency in a market. And I might be rambling here, but I think I'm getting to a point. So the problem that comes up in a society like that is we all kind of get old. And like for me, for instance, a really good example is like, I feel a lot of my identity comes from what I do for a living. I really enjoy making art. I enjoy being a creative. But there's also like innovations out there, right? Like there's AI that's being developed that at some point maybe it'll get so good that my job will be entirely irrelevant. Who knows? That's a possibility. By the way, that's not just a possibility with art, that's a possibility for everyone. it could be that maybe I lose function in my hands, and I'm not able to draw anymore. And then that value that, I feel I contribute to society, again, in the system where it's like, hey, what are you contributing? And as long as you're contributing, you have value, right? Um, there's going to come a point in my life where I can't contribute. And there's going to come a point in your life where you can't contribute. And there's going to be points in life where you can't really offer value. Instead, you actually have to like rely on friends or family or mercy or the love of others or the irritated obligation of others to kind of get through. And you can kind of see how that plays out with like our elderly populations, right? Where the elderly are quite often viewed as like a burden or a pain to kind of deal with, and yet they were all productive members of our society for as long as we will be. And so it's like this weird thing where if our value is resulting from our contribution, then is it irrational for someone who can't contribute to then feel like they have no meaning or purpose in our society? And I think that if you're defining your parameters by your value coming from your contributions, then I think that runs this dangerous game of kind of collapsing on itself, because we all get to a point where we can't contribute, or it leads to rationalization of things I don't agree with. Because I think human life has value, regardless of the contribution that it gives. I think just by existing, people have value. I think that, people as individuals, are made in the image of God, and I think that gives them inherent worth that's beyond what they do. And I think that in itself, just their life, their breath, like the fact that they exist is a blessing to everyone. Like they're made in the image of God, like they have value, like innumerable value. And then, yeah, it's cool if they can contribute. Like that does make society better when people can contribute. But even if a person can't contribute, I do think they kind of have value. So that brings up like this real weird conundrum, right? If you're a person in a society where all of the value is derived from, I got to make sure I'm still drawing. So if I do deviate a little bit when I'm talking, forgive me. I'm also drawing. So there are times where I might space out and kind of lose track of where I'm at. But anyhow, so if you're in a society where, your value is measured by what you contribute, and you get to a point where you feel like you're contributing nothing, and maybe, I mean, quite often that could be being in the throes of depression. And maybe you are being irrational and you are contributing something, like you are having an impact on people. I tend to think you kind of are quite often, regardless, right? But if you get convinced that you're not contributing and you're in a society where your only value is in what you can bring to the table for everyone, it's kind of like a lifeboat where basically like that's lifeboat morality in a weird way. It's like, and if you're the guy on the lifeboat who's gonna get thrown off because we're running out of room and you're not contributing, that's kind of how people can feel in life. I know when I've been in like deep depression, I've definitely had those moments where I felt like we were all on a raft and I was the guy who got voted off, and I didn't disagree with the vote. I was like, yeah, I think that's a pretty fair call. That's a good kind of analogy for when I've been at my lows, and sometimes when I will be at my lows. Like I don't. I think depression is something I'll be living with for a long time. Whether I'm like on a good swing or something like that, I think the way my mind works is just going to kind of lead there every once in a while. But I'm aware of it, and that's good because you can kind of get ahead of it a little bit. But yeah, so if you're in this like lifeboat, right, you feel like you're the person who's going to be cast off. Most likely it's depression, but there's these rare cases, and this is where it gets to that uncomfortable question or uncomfortable thought that I don't think a lot of people grapple with. Because quite often as a society, how we deal with people who are depressed is, let me see. I think Alan phrased this pretty well. What did he call it? Now I'm blanking out on what he called it. It was a really great word. It was pretty much technique. That's it. So, society quite often like the solution is technique. So it's like, you don't feel healthy, you don't feel good. Well, maybe do these exercises. And I've definitely, think a lot of these techniques actually help, right? But do exercise, or are you eating right? Or have you tried this medication, or have you tried therapy? There's help out there. Like, this is usually people's responses to when somebody's suffering, right? Like, a lot of it's kind of like this prescriptive approach where it's like, hey, you're not right for feeling that way, and here's what'll make you right. You just have to do these 50 other things. The problem with that is, and also to kind of deny the rationality of like what the person is feeling, because not entirely untruly, when somebody's in the depth of despair, quite often they aren't seeing clearly. Now, here's where it gets weird. What if occasionally the person is seeing clearly? What if the person has nothing to contribute? What if they've burnt all contacts, like all relationships, been separated from their families, so there's nothing there, have kind of burnt through everything? What do you say to those people? Do you say, "Oh, hang in there," because your friends are, looking out for you? But like, if they sincerely, not in a distorted way, because I know, like, depression can make these things feel that way, even though they're not that way. And I definitely know how that goes, because, like, again, like, mental illness can play real good tricks on us to make us think things that aren't true and make them feel like they're the most true thing in the world. But I'm getting at, like, what do you do in a scenario where these things are true, right? That becomes a little different. And I think that's the question that I think a lot of people are afraid of sometimes. One of them is, like, when people are depressed, sometimes it's a very rational response to the world around them. Sometimes the world around us is unbearable, right? Sometimes horrible things happen. Beautiful things happen in life, right? But sometimes horrible things happen. And then there's that, inevitable, right? And this is the thing that bugs all existentialists and haunts all people in existence, is like that dark reality of, like, we're all heading to the same place. Like, we're all heading to an ending where we kind of know the ending, or at least on paper know the ending. And that ending isn't the most beautiful thing. The measurable, visible ending is not pretty usually. And I know there's people who try to kind of make it pretty, but it's usually not, right? And it's kind of a heart-wrenching ending for most of us, because we're leaving a scar on the people we've left behind, right? Like, that, especially when we have community and friends, right? There's this irreplaceable hole and void that we've left in the universe. And people just have to kind of deal with that. And that becomes rough as you get older. You deal with that more. You lose a lot of people, and you have to face that void more and more. So when you're having a conversation with somebody who's facing the void, like they're actually looking at it, and let me know if this is making any sense. I know this is a heavier topic. I'll get back to goofy topics in a bit. Maybe we'll play Risk after I finish shading 2 of these, just to lighten things up a little bit. But sometimes when somebody's looking at the void and it's terrifying and miserable, and they're looking at current life and it's terrifying and miserable, sometimes they're just not wrong. And now maybe their solution is wrong, or what they're thinking of doing is wrong. But I think sometimes we do a disservice to people by pretending that everything's just fancy and wonderful, and that people don't suffer, and that there isn't suffering in life. Now we can just stay busy and kind of stay ahead of it. And again, like, there's some great things you can do if you're depressed. If you're really at a low, you should reach out and get help, seek assistance, get therapy, take medication, talk to your friends. Like, there's a bunch of great things you should do if you are ever feeling down. So I don't want this to sound prescriptive. It's just kind of an interesting topic, like, for me to, it's just something I'm thinking about. And that book made me think about it, because I've talked about this with my friend who wrote it. So the scary thing is, like, if you're like I am, and you believe that the world is fundamentally broken, which I do, I don't think it's all horror and all awful. I don't think that. I think there's a lot of beauty in this life. I think there are a lot of things that are very amazing. I think art is a vehicle, like, to kind of see windows and pictures of those beautiful things, and sometimes of those terrifying things. But I think there are definitely times where the suffering in this life is close to unbearable. And I think that sometimes depression is not irrational. I think sometimes, and I definitely know there are some cases, there's a lot of cases where people are completely mentally ill and they need medication and they need help. There's sometimes where they're depressed, and their reason for being depressed is actually really, um, it's like, at least to somebody who's depressed, I should describe it. Or not to somebody who's depressed, to somebody who's never been depressed. Imagine you go to Disneyland, and everyone's at Disneyland and enjoying Disneyland and thinks it's real and thinks the rides are really exciting and fun. And imagine you've been to Disneyland a bunch of times, and at some point you figure out this is an amusement park. So you can still enjoy the rides, you can still kind of enjoy the experience in the park, right? But your experience is going to be a lot different than somebody who goes in and thinks everything is a real thing. So imagine if you felt that way, but like with life, where you can kind of get enjoyment and you can have pleasant experiences, but in the back of your head, you're like, you have this knowledge that, like, first off, like, this is a visit that's going to end. And second off, like, this isn't all it's cracked up to be. There's people in the costumes, right? There's, like, the costumes of, like, the Mickey Mouse and all of that. Like, there's people, like, I'm just saying in this hypothetical, let's pretend everybody actually believes that that is Pluto and Mickey Mouse, and everybody actually believes these are really those characters, and they're just super into it because they're like, man, I'm meeting these princesses from movies, and I'm meeting these characters from these movies, and they're all living here at Disneyland. And then imagine you're the one visitor who's like, knows it's a guy in a costume. It doesn't make it any less fun per se. It just makes your knowledge and your experience of it a little dulled, as opposed to how it would be if you like had that moment of kind of really believing. And I think that happens for a lot of people when it comes to depression and life. I think sometimes people get to a point where they kind of feel like they see behind the costume and it's not as interesting and exciting and fun as the costume, right? As it was when you thought the costume was the actual character. So when people come to that conclusion, I feel, this is my own theory on it, and I don't know if I'm crazy here on it, but I think sometimes we do a disservice to people, especially people in the throes of depression, by pretending that, like, first off, that depression is completely abnormal, and kind of like putting depression or people's struggles in the category of productivity. As a workplace, you should 100%, you kind of have to do that, right? Because you have to make money. And honestly, you have to make money so that the people can keep a job. um, and so your priority number one, if you're like a CEO or something like that, right, is you have fiscal responsibilities. You have to make sure the bottom line is covered. And you should be empathetic and caring and stuff like that with people, but there are incentives that go beyond that. But I'm saying, like, in general, as a society, we shouldn't be treating always people who are not feeling great as though they are the abnormal exception, as opposed to the rule. Because quite often in this life, you're gonna have times that are dark. Life is hard, and I feel like our responses, and I'll admit myself being culpable in this, right? Where quite often my response, even though I've experienced like depression, I've experienced dark times, I've experienced times where I've been really down. I have definitely had those moments of like looking at, like, the Disneyland example, like looking at the costumes and being like, these are all kind of stupid. Like, like, it was fun when I was a kid, but this is kind of getting old. I've had those moments. And yet I have definitely erred in the way that I'm talking about too, where when I meet somebody who's going through grief or kind of struggling or talking about a darker subject, quite often the weight of it is so hard to bear. Um, and not in a negative way, just like in a kind of typical societal way of like, dude, this is a little heavier than I'm ready for, right? That's usually my kind of go to like default response to that kind of stuff. And I have definitely had times where somebody's going through a really hard time and I just don't have it in me to bear their weight with them. I don't have it in me to hear their story. Or I just want to feel good for a second about something good that happened. I don't want to sit and think about the ills of the world. And I guess what I'm getting at is, like, I don't think your responsibility is to sit and think about the ills of the world at all. I just think sometimes the kind of nonchalant response to people who are suffering of like, well, did you try this? Well, have you tried sleep? Well, have you tried these things? Have you tried these fixes? Have you tried like these prescriptions? Have you tried these things? I hear modern medicine's really improved. I've heard, I saw on a podcast the other day they recommended blah blah blah. Like, I think sometimes that response is like the worst we can possibly give to somebody who's suffering. I think quite often the better response would be to hear them out and kind of suffer with them. And I'm not talking about, like, you have to be careful when you're dealing with people who are mentally ill. I have had definitely bouts of mental illness in my life. My wife has struggled with that stuff. I have a lot of friends. I mean, all my friends are artists, so I think we're all kind of a bit of a madhouse, right? Um, but so I'm not saying that you should enable illness. And I want to be really clear about that, because that is something you got to watch out for. Like, if I'm super depressed, don't let me drag you into the deep end with you, with me. That is inevitably going to be a problem when you're dealing with people who are suffering from depression or anxiety or anything like that. Like, there is kind of a bit of a truth to the idea of, like, I forget what it is when they say that, like, sometimes, like, saving someone who's drowning can actually cause everyone to drown. And there's a huge element of that to mental illness. I will definitely say that. So you have to kind of draw clear boundaries and stuff like that when you're dealing with people who are especially having episodes or something like that. I don't want to pretend that you should just be like, oh my gosh, I'm going to feel everything you're feeling, and then we're both drowning. But I'm also saying that sometimes I think this overt optimism that our society defaults to, because we're in a society that, as I was kind of explaining, is based on, like, what you can contribute, and the fear that our society is very much self-made. I really like this about the US too. And I feel this to an extent. It's like self-made, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Like, you get it done yourself. You make your own reality. You make your own, future. The power is in your hands. And these are all, like, really powerful, kind of cool, motivating ideas that exist in our society. But again, they're all based on what you add to, what can you add? What can you do? What can you contribute? Okay, you have value now, right? Because you do this thing well. It's all about performance. And the thing that I think is the reaction that's based on our society being like that is the one where it's like, well, cheer up, like, or have you tried these things? Have you tried these fixes? Or just kind of trying to brighten the topic or brighten the day. And don't get me wrong, there's a place for that. But I think all of that originates from the idea of us trying to take someone, like, we're in this society that's hyper productivity based. And there's a danger in that structure if someone is no longer contributing. Because in our structure, at least outside of, philosophy, like, just in our society, when someone's not contributing, I mean, you got to get that person away. You have to move them away. Like, they have no value. They're going to drag everybody down. They're in the deep end. You're going to drown. And so we almost have this self-preservation that comes up where it's like, again, like the lifeboat thing or something, where it's like, dude, our lifeboat's sinking. This person is not contributing. They're freaking out. We don't have time for this. We got to throw them overboard so we can get out of this storm and, like, survive. Like, it's not worth all of us dying on the raft, right? I think sometimes because of that, we're kind of quick to give prescriptions because we want a quick fix for the person. Give prescriptions because we want to believe that if we were in that situation, we would be able to do those ticked off things. Like, we'd be able to do a checklist that we're giving them and get out of it. We're horrified at the thought of whatever this is happening to us. Like, if it's a loss of a loved one, it's a horrific and scary thing for people to talk about that with other people. It's a very vulnerable thing. It's a hard thing to talk about. It's a thing that you can't always talk about. And it's really hard when you have a friend who's lost a loved one, even when you've lost a loved one. because talking to them opens up the possibility of the loss of everyone in your life. And that is a horrifying, terrifying thing that's almost like immobilizing for people. And so people instead just kind of dodge it, stay busy, try to kind of cheer the person up in a very trite, like demeaning way, because they want to keep the raft moving on this sinking ship. You know, and that's not always a bad thing. Like, we shouldn't let people wallow, right? But there's a difference between wallowing in sorrow, and there's a difference between happiness and kind of like existence. And existence is happy, but it's not all about happiness, and it's not all about a lack of struggle. Life is a struggle. And I think that there are definitely going to be times where depression is a very rational response to the throes of life, to the struggles that people are dealing with, to sometimes it's a genetic struggle, sometimes it's a war that's like, you know, happening in another country or something like that. We are in a broken world where crappy things happen sometimes, and the ending is not usually pleasant of like most of our times. And so that's why I'm saying, like, I think that it's an interesting conversation to have, and I think it is really important for people to have an answer, like, especially if you haven't had that kind of experience before, of being in like the throes or depths of despair or depression. I think it's important to have an answer of what is going to get you out of bed. And that's what the book was really interesting to kind of highlight, was that that question, that fundamental question, becomes one of the heaviest decisions most of us will make at some point in our life. Most of us are going to have, like, some of us are going to have this experience daily. I know people who, you know, I struggle with depression, but I know people who struggle with depression much heavier than I do. Some of them because of like life circumstances that are much heavier than anything I've borne. Some of them because of genetics that are much heavier than anything I've borne, right? But so for some people, this is a daily question that they have to grapple with. For me, it's probably a more common question that I have to grapple with than, you know, your average Joe, because I don't think I'm neurotypical. But I also want to say, I don't think everyone is as neurotypical as they like to think. And that's kind of what I'm getting at, is like, I think that at some point in life, you are going to hit, not you, but, well, no, probably you, if you're listening, whoever you are, you're going to hit a point where that question is really hard to answer. Why should I get out of bed? Why even continue? Right? These are heavy questions. And it's good to think of them before you're in the throes of it, and then you have to answer it, right? When you're in the throes of it and you literally can't get out of bed because you're so overwhelmed with whatever it is, that's going to be a hard time to kind of work it out. So I think, like, that is the fundamental question. I think, why should I get out of bed? Why should I continue? Why, right? Like, there's a why. And I think it's a really valid thing to think about a why, and think about a why that'll be tested, that'll actually work. That'll kind of rationally work. Because a lot of the whys fall apart in the depths. And so I think it's just a worthy thing to consider. Another thing to consider, again, and this is kind of the more, oh goodness, I just messed up this hand. We're gonna undo that real quick. But another thing to consider is also, like, there are times where it's not always, it's not like our lives in nature are meant to be pleasant. The way things are in nature is very brutal, very detached, and honestly, it's pretty chaotic. And so, in the chaos and the detachment and the brutality and the kind of like, I don't know, like I've heard this by a lot of people on like nature documentaries, where it's like nature does not care. like, like a tsunami does not care about your graphic novel, you know? It doesn't, right? And so when a tsunami hits, it's not going to care about the amount of work you put into your house, the amount of stuff you put into your whatever, whether you've been a good person, whether you were a bad person. When it comes to like just natural occurrences, they happen to the good and the bad, right? They happen they happen inexplicably. Um, and so it's like it's an interesting thing to consider that there are times where depression is not irrational. And that's what I think is it's a scary idea, but sometimes it's actually an observation of things as they are. Now, does that mean we should always be depressed? And I don't think so. I think what that means is maybe we're seeing clearly, but we're just not seeing the whole. So it's kind of like the way I felt when I've dealt with depression is and other kind of mental issues and stuff is it's almost like my vision is very clear, but it's directed in a very specific area. And so I might be seeing clearly, but I'm not seeing the whole picture because I'm so focused on the thing I am seeing fairly clearly. And maybe I get so focused on that thing that it becomes obscure. But it's like I can get so focused that I miss the big picture or miss the more important implications that kind of give value to this thing we're all kind of on. So I think that you can both be rational in your observation, but irrational in your conclusion. And that's kind of where I'm getting is I think that we should think about a conclusion, not just parse it off with something that may not hold up. Um, so that's what I've been thinking about. I know that's like really heavy, weird shit, and I hope I didn't bum you guys out. So I know there's multiple, couple people watching now. How are you doing? That was a heavier one. Something I'm not quite sure if I've really parsed out like my own thoughts on it. I definitely have had those moments of I believe personally that like again like this world is not right. We're in a fallen world, and so I think it's a very rational response to look at something that was intended to be good and was broken, and see the brokenness and feel the brokenness. I don't think that's crazy. I think that's pretty rational, a rational response to the world we find ourselves in. But that's my weird like 1 hour rant. So what we're gonna do, we're almost at the hour mark. I'm gonna finish up this this panel, then we're gonna watch a trailer. If you guys have a preferred trailer, let me know. And if you guys are up late working on projects and stuff like that, let me know. If you have any thoughts on that too, like what are your thoughts on this whole little rant I did? Did it make any sense? And I don't mean that in a. Sometimes I can sound condescending, and I'm not. Like that wasn't meant to be a condescending question. Like, does that make sense? As if I'm talking over your head, kind of thing. I literally want to know, did I make any sense? Because sometimes I don't make sense. And so that's more of like an honest, like, is that making sense? Not a like, does that work for your minds? No, I don't think like that. Quite often it's quite the opposite, where I'm like, I talk in gibberish sometimes, and I want to make sure that that whole thing made some sense. So we're gonna get this page toned, and it's gonna happen. It's almost midnight, you guys. Corey said, I just logged on. I missed the deep part. That's okay. I was talking about the basic premise of sometimes our society being afraid of the fact that depression isn't always irrational. And being depressed isn't always reliant on an irrational view of the world. Sometimes it's a very rational response to the broken world we find ourselves in, especially in a society. I'm going to boil this down real quick, Corey. Everything we went over, because I'm very long-winded, so I could probably say it in about a minute, even though it took me about an hour. So boiling it down, we're in a society that finds value based on the stuff we're doing, and what we can contribute. And so that's a great society as long as you're somebody who can contribute. But if you're a person who can't, does that then take away your value? And our society very much tries to reinforce the idea that yes, it does. Like, you are valueless once you cannot contribute. And in a society like that, that is defining people's worth and value by like what they can offer and what they can do, rather than their humanity and their existence as being valuable in itself, then we should not be surprised to find ourselves in a world of depressed people. Because if you feel like you can't contribute, it's a pretty rational response to think, wow, I can't contribute. I'm a burden on the people around me, that kind of thing. And that can lead to depressive thoughts, but it's not irrational. It's actually the structure of the society that actually is not, that is leading to that kind of thinking. So that was my rough idea. Thomas Adams said, I think Jordan Peterson said something like, ask yourself, are you really depressed, or is your life not going in proper direction? Yeah. And again, like the whole Jordan Peterson, like, I'm not a fan of Jordan Peterson, but I wouldn't disagree with that. Like, that's a healthy question to ask. What if your answer is like no? And what if you're, screwed? like meaning, that's a great question if you're a person who's made some wrong choices and now you're in a bad spot, right? Because that can help you assess. And again, in the productive based world, where it's all about what you offer and what you can offer and what you contribute to society, that's great. Let's say you're like 90, and you're feeling like you can't contribute. You know what I mean? And you've literally lost function and are no longer able to do your trade. Your mind is fading, you have nothing to contribute. That's the part that I'm talking about. What if you're a person who's lost your mental faculties to the point where you have lost contact with reality, and the world is like literally melting when you look around? What does that person do? Do they do a little Jordan Peterson, like, am I contributing? Or are they just kind of focused on not having everything in their vision melt? Like, that's my point. Like, we all know the kind of pull yourself up by your bootstrap stuff. Um, and I don't think most of us disagree with that. Like, I would tell, like, I'm sure Corey's told his students too. I'd tell an artist if they're like, depressed and they're like, why am I not, having success in my field and stuff like that? If I look at their life and I'm like, they haven't really submitted stuff, they haven't made a portfolio, they haven't really been trying these different directions, I would be like, well, you got to just button down and like do the work, And if you feel like you headed on a wrong path, like, you need to kind of course correct. And like, this depression that's kind of coming up is like a nice little red light or red flag saying, hey, head back, right? And that's a good evolutionary thing built into all of us, right? So that I agree with, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about scenarios where the person's not wrong, like they literally don't contribute or can't. There's the dogs I was talking about an hour ago. Everybody's home, safe. That's good news. Does that make sense? So that was a heavier topic. All right, so we are almost to the point of playing a trailer. Is there anything on your guys' minds? And also, what are you guys working on? Corey, any new designs heading in directions that are uncharted? I was trying to think of another word for new. All right, so we are pretty much done with this panel, the toning. And so we're going to take a quick break. I'll play a trailer for Corey said each soul has intrinsic value. My kids don't earn their keep. From a transactional standpoint, they're not worth it, yet I love them more than I can express. I agree. And I think that's an important thing, is like kind of finding value outside of just people's contributions. That's kind of where, like, I think it's important to like be able to kind of think about that stuff I was talking about earlier. But yeah, I agree with you, Corey. Okay. You guys, check yourself before you wreck yourself. We just finished toning a panel. I will also say we have finished, well, we're midway through finishing the 250th of these live streams. And so in honor of that, we'll play a trailer. And why don't you guys hit that like button in honor of that? Hit that like button. It takes 2 seconds if you're watching. And I'll be back. Now I'm going to check. I'm going to make sure you did. I know what's going on. Okay, so I'm going to play the trailer for. I'll play Jim Luhan's amazing Wordzoid trailer. Here it is.
Well, Peter, since I'm such a big music fan, I'm going to have to go with Karen Carpenter. Oh, Stu, I'm sorry. That's the incorrect answer. Trish, what you got for us?
I'm gonna go with Kim Gordon.
All right, let's check that answer. Kim Gordon. Do we have a Kim Gordon? Yes, and that means you're our new Wordzoid champion, Trish. Dale, tell Trish what she's won. Trish, you've won a copy of 2 stories, a memoir of faith and mental illness. Handwritten, hand-drawn, and handed to you by artist and writer Joshua Kemble. But wait, that's not all. You've also won a copy of Jacob's Apartment, the story of a doomed romance. What happens when you take Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind and put it in a blender with Ghost World? You get Jacob's Apartment, written and illustrated by Joshua Kemble. Trish, thank you for playing Wordzoid.
All right, great job, Trish.
I was told I was gonna get a lifetime supply of paper towels.
There's an adventure going on here. There's dogs that are really excited. Corey said, not in spite of their lack of transactional value, but because people's value transcends their net worth. I agree. Yeah, I'm with you on that too, Corey. I think Jordan Peterson is a piece of shit, but I agree with some of the stuff he says. Some of his assessments aren't wrong. He's pretty smart with some psychology and stuff. And a lot of the stuff I agree with him are like truisms, which aren't harmful for people to hear. Stuff I disagree with him are when he starts getting outside of his lane and talking nonsense. But speaking of getting outside of lanes, I'm one to talk. Here I am, an artist philosophizing. But yeah, that was kind of the crux of what I was getting at, Corey. And that book that my friend wrote just got me thinking, because that was the premise of it, is like life is struggle, and if it's not right now for you, it will be. And having an answer to the question, why should I get out of bed, is a good thing to think about, which I thought was really cool. But in a society that finds value in people's net worth, if your net worth drops, it may not be that insane for somebody to feel down, And that's the struggle too, right? Like being a human and accepting our inherent value. Because it's very easy to get lost in this, like, especially as artists, right? It's easy for us to like start just thinking transactionally about art. And it's not harmful to think transactionally about art, right? It's good to make a living doing our craft. But I think sometimes something can get lost, the inherent value in the art itself, which I think is going to be, it's going to be a really important discussion as AI kind of creeps up. If everything gets automated, this is something I've thought about. If everything gets automated, will I still be hand making comics? And I think my answer is yes. I don't know if that's mentally ill or not, but I think yes, I will still be hand making comics. If everything in art gets automated, will I still make art? I think so. I think even if I was working construction, or which I would be an awful construction worker because my hands are shot from doing art. But even if I was like working fast food, I think when I'm off my shift, I'd still be making art and probably playing Risk. But I feel like there's something to the value of a story, whether or not someone reads it. There's something to the value of work that goes beyond the reward. And that's a heavy thing to think in a society that's very like Ayn Randian in its approach, which again has utility in a market. But we're not always in a market, right? We're not always viable. And that's what I'm getting at. My grandpa was a badass, right? Like super amazing guy. Like served in World War II, did all sorts of cool stuff, right? Was a baker, cut off some of his fingers, like like I think baking. He lost some of his fingers at work. He still worked. He worked almost every day of his life till he just wasn't able to. Worked all sorts of jobs. Was a hard worker, like a really admirable man. Really good to the people around him. I saw him decline. And I'm not saying this as if this is something unique. A lot of us like will experience that, right? Where I saw him decline. It was rough, and for him, his decline wasn't that long, which is, quite often when people reach that age, that's something said quite often, like, well, it's good they didn't suffer long, right? I know this is a heavy. Yeah, I apologize. I did warn everybody at the beginning of the stream this would get a little heavy, but my point is, I watched a man who very much was contributing value beyond expression to the people in his lives, and got to a point where he was a burden. And none of us minded the burden, but there was no arguing that he wasn't a burden. And that hurt him, like it hurts people to go there, because we're in a society where, especially, you don't want to be a burden, right? You don't want to rely on other people. You don't want to, like, we want to Jordan Peterson, we want to like be self-reliant, self-sustaining, right? Like self-mastery. make our own bed. I think that's Peterson's thing, right? Like, make your bed in the morning. Did you make your bed? Like, but what happens when you literally cannot make your bed? That's my point. And there's going to be times in this life where people can't. And it's going to vary depending on the people. You know, like I said, there's some people who, like, their struggle is just going to be like, you know, like I was thinking about, like, people who are like severely mentally ill, right? And their struggle might be like, I need to take my medication. That, like, literally, you know, maybe they're like, that's all they're capable of doing. That's their struggle. You know, there's people, you know, with severe handicaps and stuff like that. It's like, we can't pretend that we're in a society where everyone can make their bed. And I'm not saying that we should allow people to cop out or make excuses, because I do agree with that idea. Like, you know, I have met a lot of artists that are kind of in a hell of their own making, you know. Corey said, I've been gathering ideas about meaning and value over the last couple of months. Yeah, I think you should read On Getting Out of Bed. It's already in its second printing, and I think it's sold out in pre-order. I'm so proud of my friend Alan, but it's a good book. Alan's books, I actually think, Corey, you'd really dig them. He's a pretty good writer. I don't even agree with the guy politically, but he's a friend and he's a good writer. I love his books. But we're on different sides of the political spectrum, which is fine. Like, that's the thing. But yeah, like, that's the thing that, like, I think needs to be more consciously, like, addressed by myself as well, right? Like, where sometimes when somebody's suffering, they don't need my list of solutions, right? They don't need my prescriptions. They don't need me to say, did you make your bed? Sometimes they might just need me to come and suffer along with them, or just hear them out and carry the burden a little bit, you know? And I think that's a hard thing in this society, because, again, like, when we're in like a lifeboat scenario. Yes. When we feel like we're in like a lifeboat strategy kind of thing, you know, again, like, if we're in a lifeboat scenario, weakness is a threat. If we're just in sheer evolution, weakness is a threat. And so, like, when we experience weakness or vulnerability, quite often, like, the inherent response societally is like, while we want to be accepting and caring about that kind of thing, we don't want to drown too, right? And so our response to those kind of things is usually to push it away, and understandably so, right? Because you can't carry the burdens of the world. You can't. If today I, like, decided I'm going to think about everyone who's having a tragic circumstance, I would be able to think about a different person every minute, and by the time I'm dead, not have thought of everyone that's suffering right now, right? So that's impossible. So I'm not kind of throwing out like a prescriptive thing in that sense. I'm just kind of observing an interesting thing that I think alienates people who are suffering in our society. Because I think we like to be kind of empathetic and hear people, but I also think we don't like being there for people. We sort of like the idea that, like, well, there's programs for that, or there's church, or there's these other things. Like, there's things out there that will take care of that. Not realizing that, like, no, like, actually quite a lot of these things, there aren't things that'll take care of that. It's an interesting, weird thing that that book got me thinking about. And also, it just got me thinking about that because it's conversations I've had with Alan myself. So the big, scary question that Alan and I liked to talk about the last few times we got together was like, what if depression's not crazy? Not all depression, but what if some of it's not crazy? It's a scary thought. What if some of it's not a signal that you need to change something? What if some of it is just a rational response to this kind of broken world we find ourselves in? That is scary to people. But that's the big scary question I feel like is a really good one to ask. Thomas Adams said, depression equals hypersanity with a question mark? Yeah, sometimes it could. That's what I'm getting at. Yeah. Now, your response to that, obviously, again, seek help, seek solutions, exercise, do all the stuff that the 20 things on a list that people are going to tell you to solve your ills. Take vitamin, whatever. You know what I mean? Go to the doctor, take prescriptions, take meds if you need to. Do what you need to do. But yeah, there's definitely a scenario where maybe it's not crazy all the time. Interesting. Corey's saying some really cool stuff. He said, it's interesting to think that it is human nature to define ourselves as we relate to others because we naturally see the world through how others relate to us. Examples, roles, categories, jobs, relationships. I'm a teacher, dad, husband, taxpayer, brother, son, American. But if those go away and change, am I still me? Does my value decrease in my agency? Yeah. And here's the thing. When I'm talking about this, I don't want to come across like I'm Mr. Above all this, because I'm not. I find a lot of enjoyment and identity in what I do for a living and what I do for my hobbies. Honestly, as nerdy as it is lately, in Risk, in my role as a father, right? But yeah, even the father thing, right? That's a very important role. But what happens when that goes away? Or if that goes away, or if that's taken away? What happens when when we're in a Job-like scenario, right? The first book ever written supposedly of the Bible was Job, right? And the whole premise of Job was kind of like life is suffering. I mean, it's this guy who is a very godly man and is just really great, amazing guy to the point where God is bragging about him, right? And everything is taken from him. Everything that could define him is completely taken from him. And his response is depression. His response is tearing his clothes and mourning, right? And the funny thing is, I think Christians just somehow missed Job. Is it weird? Because I meet a lot of Christians that are really into Jordan Peterson and pick yourself up by your bootstraps and all that stuff. But I don't meet a lot who are thinking, you know what? Sometimes maybe that's the right response. So if you look at that parable, even if you think of it, let's, if you're not a believer or whatever, that's fine. It's still an interesting story. So if you just think of it as a story, the funny part that a lot of people who read the story miss is that all of Job's friends are shitty. That's the point of that story. His friends' responses are exactly what you shouldn't do. They're hypocritical. They get chastised by God, right, for their responses. And a lot of their responses are well, have you tried this? Did you try, this guy lost his family, lost his job, is feeling sickness and stuff like that. And all his friends' responses are well, you know what helped me is I've been exercising a lot lately, and that's really helped my depression. So you should probably do that. Or you know what I've been trying to do is look on the bright side of things. Have you tried doing that? And meanwhile, Job is I just said Job. Job is in misery. And justifiably so. He shouldn't feel good. His friends should be in mourning with him. That's the point. His friends should be tearing their clothes with him. They should be alongside him and comforting him, and not comforting him with like truisms or prescriptions, like being like, yeah, that sucks. It does suck. You're going through a hard time. That is rough. That is beyond anything I can imagine. What can I do to help? Like, that's what I'm getting at, is like our response quite often is like, did you make your bed today? What do you think life is trying to tell you by taking away like half of your family? What do you think the sign is here? And like, again, like a tale that's older than time was talking about that being the wrong approach. This is a really good question too, man. Corey, see, this is why Corey and I used to do the 48-hour art check together, because we're both nerds. Like, we'll go dark, we'll go deep. He said, same as thinking physically, right? If I lose an arm or an eye, am I still me? How much of my physical form can I lose before I'm not me anymore? Yeah, and you see that as an issue, right? Like, people come back from war having lost limbs and feeling like they've lost themselves. We've all had an experience, and not to the extent that we will later in life, right? But we've all had those moments where you're not yourself, you're not in full capacity, or you're sick, or you're wounded, or something like that. And so things you used to be able to do very easily, you just can't do anymore. And anybody who's been in that position, it's like that really challenges your identity, because some of, like, whether I like it or not, some of me defining my identity is my ability to pick up my kid, right? Some of what defines my identity and my confidence is my ability to get things done. What happens when that's taken away? How is there a you left? And I think the answer is yes. Like, kind of tying into what Corey was talking about before, because we have inherent value, whether we're functional or not, Now, societal value, maybe not, but we have inherent value, like, that goes beyond societal value. But it's an interesting thing. And it's an interesting thing for me to think about, because even though I believe that, have to start looking at my life and looking at the things that I'm using to define myself that could easily disappear, and start realizing those aren't me. Like, if I lost my ability to draw tomorrow, that's not going to take away my value. And that's one thing to say, which I can easily say. But if I did, that would be a real struggle, because I would have had something that I felt identified who I am, that expresses my soul, right, just torn from me. Same with if I lost my career. If I lost my career tomorrow, in theory, I can say, and friends could tell me, oh, you have value beyond, what you make. But I don't know. I mean, I've been in that position before, where when you're struggling to make ends meet, and especially when you have people relying on you to provide, you feel like an absolute failure. And we're in a society that for sure will make you feel like an absolute failure, because it's a consumerist society, right? So you're going to be looking around, and it's like, real men do this, real men do that, real men. And whether you like it or not, you're going to meet people who imply that you're not doing your thing, right? Real men are going to blah, blah, blah. And I know, like, I don't want to just put this on men, because I know that happens with women too, where it's like a real mom or a real whatever, like a real artist, a real like, there's a lot of pressure that we all put on each other, and some of it's really good. Like, some of it pushes us to like new horizons, to new heights that we could never achieve before. Some of the best stuff that happened to me as an artist was like a hard art director who was like really harsh about some stuff, and then I learned, like a difficult teacher who like pressed me on something and pushed me to reach new heights, And it was painful. It was a struggle. But I learned from it and I got better. And sometimes that is the approach. But yeah, it's an interesting thing to think about, like parsing like what is value that I've falsely assigned to things that do not actually give me value. Maybe they give me monetary value, right? But they don't actually give me value. And that's something I think worth thinking about. Corey said, interesting insights on Job. One of the most comforting things that happened to me when I was at my lowest, completely incapable of doing anything for myself was, he said, my neighbor coming by and telling me about a time he had so much back pain that he considered suicide. Odd to think that the most comforting thing that happened was somebody not comforting me. Yeah. But part of that is because your neighbor wasn't pretending that it's all in your head, that you have it wrong, that if you just perfect a certain technique, you know what I mean? Like, did you try these stress balls? Did you try this? Have you tried this? Like, what about this? Have you been reading this? Have you been like, it wasn't a prescriptive thing that your neighbor was giving you. It was mercy. Because your neighbor's just meeting you where you're at. And they're like, yeah, I've been there and it sucks. And sometimes that's what you need to hear. Like, you know, or sometimes you need to hear, I haven't been there, but like I've been close and it was brutal. I don't know. You know, sometimes you need to hear that. Sometimes you don't need the prescriptive doctor. Sometimes you need the therapist, right? Thomas said, I think the West focuses on the human being static when in reality we are constantly changing and growing. Yes. And here's the thing. We're also constantly decaying. And this is depressing. Again, like this is a heavy stream. But that's a thing we pretend isn't happening. And it is. And to ignore that reality is insanity. To kind of, and again, like to somebody in the throes of depression, it seems like absolute insanity. Like to me now, it seems a little crazy to ignore that. But when you're in the throes of depression and you're thinking, maybe not everyone, but a lot of people I know, when you're in the throes of depression, you're like really thinking about death, right? You're really thinking, hey, we all die. When you're there and you look around and no one is thinking about it, it's insane. And people are just like, I don't know, I'll just stay busy, kind of, you know, whatever. And you're like, it can feel, and again, like not today, I'm not there today, but it can feel to somebody in the throes of that, like you're in a car that's heading towards a semi truck and everybody in the car is singing songs. And you're pointing to the driver like there's a semi truck. It's coming, like you're in the wrong lane. You're heading towards it. And everybody's like, nah, I don't know. We'll just keep driving. And you're like, but like, do you not see the thing that's gonna, like, you're not worried about the giant car we're driving into? Yeah, we'll just drive. We'll sing some songs. We'll have some fun on the way. If you were in a car like that, you would think the drivers are insane, absolutely insane. But we are in a car like that. That's my point. And I'm not trying to depress people. I think it's a worthwhile thing to think about. We are in that car. There is that approaching semi truck. We all have seen it. We all live around people who've hit it, right? It's really important to know, why should we get in the car? That's a good, healthy thing to think about. There's really unhealthy answers you could come up with from it that you should not and are not rational. And if you're considering, you know, bad choices from that, you should probably seek help, right? But my point is, it doesn't make that question irrational. That question is the most rational of like, why are we driving towards a semi truck that's coming towards us? Like, that is a completely rational question. And people will frame it as insane. And that to me is insanity. And when you're in the throes of depression, it's beyond insanity. It feels like, you know, you have people kind of playing a game and you're like, why? Why are you playing this stupid game? Yeah. Anyhow, so just some thoughts. Does this make sense? Like, again, I'm not sure if I'm just kind of rambling jargon, and I don't want to be irresponsible with what I'm talking about either. But it's an interesting world we find ourselves in, and there's a lot of very valuable questions we should be asking. And if we're not asking, we're going to get to a point in life where we're going to need answers. And if we're not there yet, maybe it'll have, like, again, like, I was bringing up my grandpa, but he got to a point where he lost faculty of everything, and it was only the last year, and he lived a really long life. He was driving up to the last year of his life, and he drove himself everywhere. He was very independent. He was chipper. He had gone through like multiple strokes, like half his body was paralyzed, and he was stoked. He loved life, like most of his life. But that last year, it was not fun. It was not fun for him. It was brutal, and that's one of the better examples I can think of like I've literally thought to myself, if I'm going to go out, that would be the way to go. Like he lived a really full life, only started to kind of fall apart the last year. You know what I mean? And and it was frustrating. It's frustrating when you're somebody who can walk and you lose the ability to walk. It's frustrating when you're somebody who can talk and you start losing your mental faculties. It's tough when you're probably tough if you're somebody who can draw and you can't draw anymore. These are really hard things. But he did have, he had thought about that, like what is my reason, right? And he never lost hope. And that's helpful in that time, right? I love this. Thomas said to focus only on the decay is not good as well. Life can be complicated. Yeah, no, you shouldn't only focus on the decay, but don't ignore it. That's my point. That's the point that's bizarre, it's nuanced and it is complicated. Nothing is very simple in this life, but it is one of those things of like, yeah, we're growing, we're evolving, we're learning new things. And then we have a point where we unlearn everything, right? Our brain starts going back. It's kind of crazy. So we gain wisdom, there's a lot of poetry about it, right? Like we're born into this world like a baby. We leave quite often, in a similar state. And that, like, again, that's just a reality. It's not a depressed thing to say. I agree that focus is huge and we shouldn't just walk around being like, we're all going to die. Like, pick up acoustic guitars and get all emo and stuff. Obviously, we got to stay busy. We got to be productive. We got to provide for our family. To an extent, we do need to make our bed, right? But I'm just saying, like, when you're having a friend or somebody who's like kind of a little more keenly aware of that for a little bit, the wrong response might actually be like, just think about something better. Let's do something positive. It's like sometimes my right response might actually be like, yeah, yeah, that is weird. That's actually not crazy to be bothered by that. It is a problem. So, yeah, that's been what's on my mind. Like, luckily, I don't address this topic a lot on my stream because I don't want to bum everybody out. I don't want to be like, welcome, we're doing fun art, we're working on stories, and we're going to talk about depression and the fact that we're all going to die. Hi, I'm Joshua Kemble, and we're all going to die. I guess I have had some streams like that, but it's just what's on my mind. Not that we're all going to die. Just the idea that like there are times where the depressed are not wrong. And I feel like that semi-truck analogy is a pretty good one for like the way it can feel when you're in the throes of it. And I think the Disneyland one wasn't off point either. So anyhow, the whole premise of my friend's book is like sometimes the best thing you can do is just get out of bed, and that in itself might be the only thing you can do. And in that case, hey, cool, get out of bed, you know, and think about the reason for getting out of bed, because there is a reason. It's just you need one, and there's gonna be days where you don't have one, or the one you have isn't gonna work. But that's the fundamental question: is why get out of bed? And it's a good question. So that was kind of the premise of his book a little bit. But I've been expounding upon it. Like everything I've been talking about isn't in the book. It's a very short book. It's like 200 pages or something. I like that. I like that question. I think it's a good one. And I think like what Corey, what you were talking about, you know, when you were in the thick of it, like I'm imagining there were probably days where like that's the best you're gonna do is like maybe I wake up today. You know, I get through the day. I wake up and that's what I do. And that's what I can do. You know? And your friend's response is really awesome to that because yeah, there's definitely times. Vic Do said, imagine being up this late. I'm not imagining it. I am it. I am up this late. I am making it a reality. It's not just an imaginary thing. This is a truth. So we're getting there. We're going to finish 2 of these. We're going to get the tones for 2 of these. Yeah, Corey was saying I had goals like I'd like to sit up without help. Yeah, there's going to be periods in life like that where it's like sometimes the goal might be like I need to lift 1 finger. And that might be the biggest struggle of your life, just to lift a finger. Whether it's mental incapacity or physical incapacity, you know. Yeah. Or I want to learn to put my own shirt on myself again someday. And like the frustration in that, I just cannot help but empathize with that because the frustration in something that is a simple, easy thing becoming the hardest thing on earth sounds almost unbearable. So, anyhow, Vic said, your and my definition of a short book are very different. I don't know. A 200-page book is not a long book. Like, we're not talking about graphic novel. Like, that would be a pretty long graphic novel. Even though it'd be a quick read, graphic novels go quicker than books. But I would think that's a pretty substantial graphic novel. But just for a book, like a novel, yeah, that to me is a pretty short book. It's not like War and Peace, you know? Crime and Punishment. Vic said, I want to do some warm-ups today. Nice. Drawing warm-ups or just wearing warm-ups from the 1980s? Wasn't that what those were called? Like this? Never mind. I don't think that's warm-ups. I think that's leg warmers. You can tell it's getting late. I thought you were saying leg warmers. even though you said warm-ups. And then I was picturing like Richard Simmons videos. Okay, guys, let's talk about more pressing, important stuff than the nature of reality and the fact that sometimes depressed people are right. They're not crazy. Let's talk about Richard Simmons. How, if anyone is bored, that would be a fun rabbit hole to go down. How? How did Richard Simmons become the like weight loss power video guy? How? I'm sure there's got to be some kind of like crazy biography behind it. But I remember there was a period in time where that guy was like the most known like activity guy. Like he was like the workout for a while, which is weird considering he did not look physically like anyone would want to look. And yet he had these amazing workout videos. I don't even think I saw them, but I was aware of them. They were like a thing. It was a meme at the time. He was like as big as like Bob Ross. But I want to know, and maybe we'll go on a rabbit hole if nobody in chat knows. Maybe we'll watch some videos on I want to know the origins of Richard Simmons. Like, where did this dude come from? Why was he making workout videos? How did that blow up? How did that become a thing? This is how my mind works as it edges past midnight. It's like it goes from we're all going to die. We lead an existence full of suffering. We need to think about reasons why we're going to get out of bed in the morning. And then why does Richard Simmons like what was with that? Thomas Adams said it was the 80s. Enough said. Vic said, have you ever tried doing a jazzercise tape all the way through? Have I? The question is, who hasn't? No. So I have this friend growing up that I was in bands with and stuff like that. I actually live near the guy now. He's a really good guy. But his mom every morning used to do the Richard Simmons videos, like the workouts. And so when we were like 16 and 18 and 16, we would be like doing band practice or whatever, and then have a late night. I'd crash over there. And then we would try to wake up at the same time and kind of be like this next to her, like, yeah, you rock. It was amazing. But no joke. Yeah, I think we'd do it for like 2 seconds and then be like, okay, this is actually hard. We're done. Yeah, Vic said, I have passed out trying to do it, and I'm a decently fit teen. Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, I'm sure Richardson, I don't know. We gotta let me know if you guys would be interested in that deep dive. There's gotta be YouTube videos about where that guy came from. And I'm sure it's like one of those things like so like Bob Ross is a really good example. I used to hate Bob Ross with like all of my might. I hated him. And then it became like this kind of thing where in art school I kind of ironically liked Bob Ross. So like I got a Bob Ross palette knife just to kind of troll my painting teacher. And he hated Bob Ross. And so that was hilarious because every time I'd pull out that palette knife, he'd just be like, what? And I'd be like, no, this is the palette knife. You've been recommending palette knives, but this is the best one, just to like troll him a little bit. However, as I've gotten older and I've seen more biographies and stuff on him, I think he was a pretty cool dude. I I think Bob Ross is pretty rad. Like learning all that stuff about how that was like a way he could kind of de-escalate and handle his anger, and he was trying to kind of switch from being this kind of drill sergeant, like just angry guy, to like this kind of peace loving, happy, contented guy. And then I saw like Bob Ross's videos, is like, these are amazing. Like this guy's amazing. So I am like actually non-ironically, I'm not going to buy his art, but I like Bob Ross. I bet the same thing will happen with Richard Simmons. Right now it's like a meme, and it's like, what was that, right? And then I'll probably watch this biography or something. We'll watch it together on stream. And by the end of it, we'll all be tearing up and being like, yeah, he was a freaking legend, like he was a hero. Well, I'll be like, oh man, how did we lose Richard? I'm sure it'll happen. I'm sure it will. Next thing you know, we'll be like starting YouTube channels, like Sweating to the Oldies together. I mean, this is gonna like start. We'll start like a weird cult that does jazzercise. Art casters will change to jazz casters. And that's the end of the world, really. Thomas said this was when home VCRs were becoming common, for sure. Vic said 80s moms did a hardcore workout. It's true. Thomas said he was one of the first, and he was known because of starring in soap operas. Interesting. Cordy said, I always assumed someone important wanted a flamboyant man to make Jay Leno uncomfortable on his show. Vic said, I like Bob Ross. He was just a good person with a beautiful white boy afro. That's true. He had an amazing afro. I'm working on it. The problem is I used to like laugh at afros, but as I get older, this is just the default if I don't get a haircut in a while. My hair wants to be an afro. It's like, I don't know, maybe I've listened to too many Dylan songs and suddenly my hair is just like, it's got to be everywhere. Thomas said, if you like Bob Ross, you need to see the original William Alexander. Some words and actions, but much more energy. Yes. Vic said, I want to do a stream where I have people trying to do jazzercise now. I think the thing is, it might be possible. You might be able to talk to Adam about that. I could see Adam Lore doing a jazzercise stream, like non-ironically. I could see him doing that. You just have to catch him on the right day. All right. So I think instead of doing a game, I want to close out with a game of Risk, but I want to get a little further. It is looking like I will likely not finish the toning of this page tonight. I was hoping I'd get the whole page, but it's looking like this won't get entirely finished. However, I think I could probably get 2 panels further, and maybe we could deep dive. We could deep dive into Richard Simmons. If that is something you guys would be down to go on that journey with me, let me know in the chats. If that is absolutely something, a journey you absolutely do not want to go on, speak now or forever hold your peace. Did they ever, this is just a side thing. Did Reese's Pieces ever use that as like a marketing thing? where it's like a person at a wedding holding their Reese's Pieces. And it's like, speak now or forever hold your peace. And they're like, I have to not speak. Like, yeah, I don't know. I feel like they could do a lot of really dark promotions. Instead of rest in peace, it could be rest in Reese's Pieces. Vic said, I got a mat on my head. Nah, I'm doing this on mine with an extremely edited version where I don't get copyright struck. Maybe do 3-minute clips of 5 different exercises from different tapes. I just want to see if there's like a YouTube essay or something about him that we could like watch and comment on. There has to be. Okay, guys. So I'm going to finish up this panel and then we're going to play a trailer real quick. And whilst I am getting water, taking a very brief break, and the trailer is playing, I will consider whether I have it in me to do 2 more panels and possibly go down a deep dive on Richard Simmons. Because now I'm curious. Okay, we're at the 2-hour mark. This is episode 250 of my live stream. So if 250 of these things haven't earned a like, what are you doing? There's 7 people watching. I want to see 7 likes when I come back. I see you. I see you right now. You can click that like. That's all. Just click it. Boom. Like that. Pop. Takes 2 seconds. I'll be checking. When I come back, I want to see a bunch of likes. Do it now. Do it now. You. Yeah, you. The one who's like, man, I'm passively watching. No, hit that like. And I'll be back. I'm going to play the trailer for Jacob's Apartment. I see you. I see you didn't hit the like. Hit it. Click it right now. Okay. That'll do it. Here's Jacob's Apartment, and then we will come back. We'll pencil. Let me know in the chats while this is playing, too. Do you want to go on a deep dive watching like a bio or an epic on Richard Simmons? Or do you want to continue our discussion about deeper things, which we can do, too? Whatever you guys are in the mood for, I will feed you that content. And here is Jacob's Apartment trailer. Speak clearly, it seems that only in dreams can we be these things we've seen and walk around breathing I don't know the part to play in this heart of mine. There's dissonant things, they split at the seams. We're back. Did you hit like? You did? Good. Okay. I think I lost like 3 viewers just saying that. Like, they're like, don't you tell me what to do. I pull myself up by my bootstraps. Don't you be telling me what to do when I'm watching this. But hey, you know what? I'm trying to get better at that because I have noticed that pretty much every streamer, live streamer that I admire does that. And it seems to work. So I'm going to try it. And if it's not working, then what are you doing? Help it work. But anyhow, so I don't know if I'm going to watch a deep dive. I don't know. I don't know if I'm in the mood. So it looks like Vic took off and went to bed. That's good. Sleep is good. Sleep is healthy. Welcome to the 1 a.m. Kemble Nation. For those of you who don't know, if you've been watching my live stream, you are a member of the Kremlin. If you would like to become an official member of the Kremlin, which is the joke name for the followers on this channel, you can. I actually offer channel memberships. What will you get for that? You get like a little icon that you can put in chats. At this point, I want to eventually add more, but at this point, I have nobody, I think, doing that. And so until I have some people on there, I don't want to like put a ton of effort into it. But it is a way to tip and maybe put a couple bucks my way. It's me hat in the street kind of thing. Okay. All that stuff's out of the way. Now let's get back to fun conversations. And I love how half my topic was like about consumerism, and then after it, and how consumerism can drive us to be inhuman. And after all that content, I'm like and subscribe and hit the bell and like ultimate consumer. It's the world we live in, you guys. So we're gonna tone this panel, and then I kind of want to just free form some topics. That's been key on my mind about value. And I do love Corey's statement about, if you take away the body, do you have value? If you take away your speech, do you have value, right? A lot of it, like, I'm a talker, right? Half of how I feel emotions, I think partially because I'm possibly very autistic. I am like incredibly bad at keeping secrets. I'm really bad at it. And not because I'm a big gossip. It's because when I think, I speak. And that is a foolish trait to have. I have trouble not speaking when I'm thinking through something. Part of how I think is by speaking. So quite often I am thinking and speaking and kind of working out a thought verbally. So in this hypothetical, like, what happens if somebody like me, who very much, like, even the way I process and think about things is through talking, how do I react if I can't? You know, like, what happens if that goes away and suddenly I'm mute? Which I think, other than the celebration of Corey and Scott because I stop interrupting them. That would be hilarious. That happens. Corey Kerr and Scott Strickland are like, yeah, we can finally talk without this guy interjecting a million times. But in all seriousness, like, it's an interesting question. Like, you know, especially for us artists, like, I think we find a lot of value in what we do, some serious identity in what we do. What's our identity outside of art, right? What's our value outside of art? Is art the only way we make value? If art is taken away, what do we do? You know, these are good questions to ask. I'm just asking questions here. The problem with doing these streams when I'm doing art is now I really want to look into the origins of Richard Simmons. Like, I have to know. I have to know how it happened. Like, even somebody in chat said daytime soaps. Like, how did that happen? How did he end up on daytime soaps? Or was it that his show was during the schedule of daytime soaps? Because the way it was worded, it made me think like he was a soap opera star. Which I'm, again, like, how? How did that happen? I need to know. We've gotten so pampered with the internet, right? Where things like that would like bug me. Like when I was younger, stuff like that would just bug me for like years, you know? And then I'd forget. I'd be like, oh, okay. Like a day later, I'd forget. And then I'd like a year later, I'd be like, how did that happen? You know? And then I kind of forget. And it's like for years. And then finally you'd find out, you know, from somebody who is knowledgeable on the subject. Or maybe you watched like a documentary or something. But we didn't have Netflix, right? So you know, maybe just by luck, like something on TV would come up and you'd be like, you know, I finally know. And I forgot that that's something I really wanted to know. And now I feel like there's that part of me that's quelled. The internet's pampered us so much with that, where it's like at our fingertips. Like right now, it's hard for me to draw because I'm like, I could go down a rabbit hole and have an answer to that question in 2 seconds. Rather than back in the day where you get like a song stuck in your head, you're not going to remember that song. You know, you don't have an app that you can hum it to that'll tell you what it was. Back in my day, kids, it was hard, is all I'm saying. Back in our day, we used to walk miles in the snow. We used to have to use jet skis to get to work and Uzis to fight bad guys just to like get across the bay so that we could get to our detective business. Thomas said he starred on General Hospital. That's crazy. How? How? I need to know. Thomas said, kids, I'm older than you. Is that true, Thomas? How old are you, sir? I don't want to dox you, though, so just ballpark it. Also, tell me your mother's maiden name, your social security. No, I'm just kidding. I've always thought that would be the funniest vlog in the world, where you have guests. Like, we should do this. Like, Corey, if you're still there, we should do this for an Artcasters episode. Just write out a bunch of questions that would be like everything you'd need to know to like hack somebody's account, and just be like, so growing up, like, what was the street you grew up on? Like, what was the name of that? Oh, okay. What was the name of like your favorite pet? Interesting. That's cool. And like, what was your mother's maiden name? Yeah. And they're like, I'm here to talk about art. You're like, yeah, no. I find that like mother's maiden names really, you know, inform. And Thomas said, I will be 55 next month. That is indeed older than me, but not older than a lot of my friends. So. I have a thing that happened once I hit 40, and I'm curious, Thomas, if this gets worse or better, at least in your experience. The second I turned 40, I just kind of like the amount of I can cuss. This is my own show. I'm so used to like not using language, but I think this is an appropriate time. The amount of fucks I give have decreased substantially after 40. Like after 40, my patience, my even caring about a lot of things I used to care about. It's just like I could care less. And I feel like every year past 40, it's just been less and less fucks that I give. Not about like family and stuff like that. Like that I care about a lot, but it's like other stuff that I used to really sweat about, you know? Is that like, does that continue? Nice. Thomas said, true, very true. Nice. By the way, what are you guys up to? What are you working on? Richard Simmons was a General Hospital star. So he was an actor? I've always thought that would be a really surreal experience to be known as a character. I've heard like interviews with actors who play villains on shows, and they'll like be walking down the street, you know, just like casually kind of going about their day. And somebody will come up to them and be like, F you, man, and like walk off. Or they're like, you're heartless, and walk off. One of the most recent stories I read about that was like back when Game of Thrones was at its peak, the kid who played Joffrey or whatever, like literally had to have security guards protect him because people hated him so much. Like absolutely hated him. They were just like, I despise you. And he's like, I'm an actor. Like it's not me. That's a character. And they're like, sure it is, you little turd. Like, you know, like I don't know. There's got to be something really surreal about that. I've experienced that a little, like not majorly, but I've definitely experienced that with books where Jacob's Apartment, the character kind of becomes like an atheist. Spoiler, and is kind of grappling with, you know, losing his faith. And I'm not an atheist. I was at a point in my life, but I am not by any means an atheist anymore. I get along with atheists, but I just, you know, I don't believe that. But I wrote a book, right, where a character was an atheist. I've definitely met people who have called me an atheist because of that book. They've been like, oh, your character was an atheist, so you must be an atheist. And it's kind of like this weird thing of like, do you understand? Like, if I wrote a character that like shot people in my book, like if I, let's say I wrote a zombie book and there's a character that just, you know, shoots zombies and is heartless and stuff like that, do people just instantly assume that I am like a person who just walks around shooting zombies? It's just a weird thing about human nature, I guess. That's got to be interesting if you're like, I mean, you know, as a writer, you can kind of get away with like, at least, especially like our level of writer, where like, I'm not like some big rock star who's known by a bunch of people. So I can walk around. I'm not going to get recognized. I've had 2 times in my life where I got recognized. Well, maybe 3 or something by somebody who was like a fan of some stuff I did. Like in my entire life. Like I can't even, I don't think I can go past my 10 hands or my 10 hands. I'm so tired. My 10 fingers. Oh my gosh. Okay. Anybody who heard me make that flub because I'm a little sleepy about 10 hands, we're going to, from now on, when we hit 1 a.m. on this stream, it's the night of the 10 hands. That's our code for 1 a.m. in the Kremlin, only in the Kremlin, with us handsome artists that are part of our secret society, will we know that the night of the 10 hands is 1 o'clock. Because that's when you start saying 10 hands instead of fingers. Okay. So where was I going with that? I feel like I was on a roll and then I forget. Oh yeah. So my point is like I haven't had that experience a bunch where somebody like recognizes me or makes a bunch of assumptions. And I've had that happen with just my little indie books. So I'm like, what is it like when you're, when you're like the villain in a show and you're just walking downtown or something and somebody just punches you and they're like, screw you, buddy. And like you walk, like you're like, what is going on? Like that's just gotta be absurd. I don't know. Frank does bring up a good point. How's it going, Frank? I'm glad you're doing okay. That's true. Frank said 3 a.m. for me. So for my time, for Pacific, it's 1 a.m. But 3 a.m. will be the night of the 10 hands. Scott did fight zombies in his youth. That he's the one exception where he wrote stories about, like a lot of people don't realize, the Young and the Dead is not fiction. It's an autobiographical book. Scott and I are both cartoonists that do heavily autobiographical work that draws from reality. Me, I wrote about, dealing with depression, caregiving for somebody with panic disorder. Scott wrote about his tragic young experience fighting zombies, and fighting off as an oncoming zombie apocalypse, basically. Very true story. That feels like Goonies meets Night of the Living Dead. But the thing is, unlike Goonies and Night of the Living Dead, Scott is speaking from his real life experience of, basically trying to make clubhouses that say no zombies allowed and keeping those zombies at bay. Hopefully finding like the source of the zombie infestation that has hit your entire city. That's all from Scott's like hard life experience. Frank says he's fine. He woke up early. That's good. I got to see where I'm at on this panel. Can we get, you know what? I think for tonight, we might just finish this third panel. Maybe we can press it a little further, but we'll see. Yeah, Scott said, or Frank said, Scott wrote about the time there was a zombie outbreak in his town. It was covered up, but he speaks out. Exactly. Gary Hodges is also a very true to life storyteller, leaking secret information about the dinosaur and zombie or Marsbot war that has been covered up by our government. The government. Have you ever wanted to say government with a B? Was that ever a desire? I was asking about pronunciations. Like Adam was doing a live stream recently, and I was kind of trying to figure out like what region the pronouncing an R in drawing, like they'll say drawing instead of drawing. And I was trying to remember what region, because I think it's a Midwest thing. But I was trying to think like, where does that come from? Like, why do some people say drawing and some people say drawing? I'm trying to remember the region that says drawing. Yeah, that's true. I probably shouldn't have mentioned that. I might disappear pretty soon, guys, for mentioning Gary's whistleblowing. Thomas said, well, if Scott grew up in Phoenix, no one really cared about Phoenix back then. The only terrible response is back then. What do you mean? No one cares now. That's the cruel response to that. But honestly, I'm a little envious. Since Gary and Scott both live in Arizona, I'm like, there's got to be something cool about Arizona. It's producing some pretty cool cats, you know? Something rad going on in Arizona. Adam said, I'm listening as I fall asleep. Awesome. Have a good rest, Adam. You did a pretty long stream, man. How long was your stream before you go to bed? Seemed like a good one. And it's been fun to see you kind of back at streaming. It feels like there was a little bit of a break. I think yours wasn't as long as like my crazy break, but yeah, Adam, you had kind of mentioned that they were pronouncing the rounded rather than unrounded A. But what I'm kind of wanting to know is like what region that is. Like I feel like it's I think it's a Midwestern thing, but I don't think it's like the Bobby's World kind of accent. But I do feel like there's drawing. I gotta figure it out. That, and I need to know why Richard Simmons was on General Hospital. Like, I mean, now I in concept understand that he was, but how? How did that happen? Nice. Adam said we ended up streaming over 7 hours and 30 minutes and then another couple hours on Phil's. Nice. How's Philip doing? How's this washing machine? So I made a joke while Adam was streaming because they were talking about washing machines. And then I was saying, I asked, what's your favorite Sonic Youth album to everybody? And it's mainly because Sonic Youth has an album that's one of their bigger albums. I think their biggest album for sales was Goo, but one of their other big selling albums was Washing Machine, which it literally has a washing machine on the cover. And they had t-shirts like in the 90s that were pretty familiar to people, which was like a blue t-shirt, like solid blue t-shirt with a white washing machine that said Sonic Youth on it. So anyhow, I tried to make that bad joke, and I don't think anyone got my joke because I'm stupid. Because it was too deep of a cut, and not in like a cool indie way. It was just it was a Hail Mary that didn't land. But I will tell you, Sonic Youth's Washing Machine is an incredible album, and it has a song on it that is probably one of the best Sonic Youth songs ever, called Diamond Sea. And it's about I can't remember the specific length. I think it's close to a 20-minute song. But that is one of the prettiest songs ever made. And it is on Washing Machine by Sonic Youth. And it is a beautiful song. Frank was saying the way Richard. I can't. That's too funny. He was saying the way Richard Simmons was cast on General Hospital was stunts. That explains why all the action sequences from General Hospital looked like jazzercise. Now I'm picturing we have to make this soap opera. Now I'm picturing a soap opera where every time there's a dramatic like fight sequence, everybody just starts jazzercising and yelling out instructions. Now punch, now punch. Oh. Warsh is the signature word of Midland accent, which is spoken in western PA to eastern Kansas, a region that includes central Illinois. There we go. Parts of West Virginia as well. I think those parts are on the country road. I'm here all night, guys, with bad jokes. All night. So I'm going to just get as far as I can by 2. I think this may be as far as I can get. And even though it's funny, I was talking about like some heavier topics at the beginning of the stream. But one thing I will say, even though it is prescriptive and stuff like that, one thing that I have noticed helps my mental well-being is being able to kind of draw boundaries for myself. So like and I don't mean like boundaries like people talk about in like relationships where it's like, oh, this is a boundary. I'm bad at drawing boundaries, that kind of thing. I mean like boundaries like, because I'm working this job of doing comics and I'm doing a day job as an art director, which is pretty like a pretty heavy job. Like it has a lot of responsibility, a lot of a lot of consequences if I fail at those responsibilities. It's a power job, like, and not in a negative way, but it has a lot of weight to it and can exhaust you, is all I'm saying. And then I'm a dad, and there's all this other stuff, and then I'm doing these crazy graphic novels. I have to be really good about not pushing beyond, like, basically pushing so far that I burn out. And I have done that, and because I have pushed too far and burnt out, I have gotten a little bit better at gauging. And instead of writing it to the very line of it, it's things like where I'm like, I think pushing to this page or just this panel will probably be enough for tonight. Making that call is a hard one to make when you're like me, because the way I work, I want to keep going. I want to keep going till, also I'm really not a bad sleeper. I sleep well, but I'm also, even after having a kid, it's like I'm not a morning person. I never have been a morning person. I feel alive and most thriving in the deep hours of the night into the early morning. And by that, I mean, like, if I was on my own schedule, even when I was freelance, when I used to work running my own business and stuff like that, most of my work I would do at like, start my day at like midnight. I don't know if this is because of I've always been a night owl, but I think that got exacerbated when I used to work graveyard shifts when I was much younger. But I feel like that threw off my, whatever it's called, like circadian rhythm or something, or it fed it, like, to the point where my natural way of being is to be up late at night and kind of be like vampiric. It's like I like being up late at night and sleeping during the day. That's kind of my natural default state. If I have my way, that's the the lifestyle, the hours I would work. And in the past, when I've worked on my own, those were the hours I would work. So anyhow, point being, it is a little hard to measure those boundaries because I do get very activated as an artist at like this time. Especially, the night of the 10 hands, that's when it all starts, all the magic starts happening. All 10 hands start activating. Okay. But I do kind of envy people who can just like naturally wake up at like, 4 in the morning or 5 in the morning and they're just boom, like all day long, just super effective. And I am not one of those people. I wake up, it takes me like a good while to feel awake. It takes me a good while to like have some coffee, to not hate the universe. Whereas right now, it's like this is the beautiful spot in time that I love, So we've got Frank said, "Don't forget to wash your hands." And then also Frank got my deep cut. Boom. Frank Salazar, always on point. Thank you, sir. And then we've got Thomas saying, "I know since I grew up in West Virginia, they say winder for window." Winder? Winder? That's interesting to me. I'm like trying to even piece that one together. I guess that kind of makes sense because you can wind down a window. You know what's funny? Maybe winder is a better word for it. But then if they call a winder a window, is that only a window that can wind? Or is that like for like the windows in your house too? Because like in a car, calling it a winder actually kind of has its own logic to it. But if you're calling your house window a winder, that sounds like you're winding. That sounds like you're telling me a winder. But you never know. I mean, with like terminology and etymology and stuff, it's always really fascinating. I could like probably just go down a rabbit hole of just listening to etymologies and regional dialects and stuff like that. Look at that beautiful panel. All right, guys. You know what we're going to do? I did well. I done well. I got 3 panels done tonight. We'll probably finish toning this page tomorrow. I think we did good work. And I think that I should reward that work by playing Risk. So I'm going to play a game of Risk. But first, I'm going to play a trailer. And I'm going to ask that if you haven't, hit that like button. And then we'll close out the night with a game of Risk where I attempt to dominate the world. I feel ready. I also feel very ready to go to bed, and that'll help my little autistic-y brain rest by playing a game with numbers that are attacking each other. That's like this weird strategic thing. And I'm not even that good at. We're going to play that in a second. But I'll have some water and just kind of wait here till you hit that like button. Yeah. Right there. Yep. Okay, cool. Now we will play. Frank, you'd be proud of me. I was trying to substitute for you during Adam's stream by being the guy who's making all the jokes. And I was trying to honor you with like Frank level jokes, but I'm not as funny. So, but I was subbing in for you, just so you know, because I felt like this kind of joke is gold. Okay, guys, trailer, then risk. Oh, before we do the trailer too, let's get everything set so that like when we come back, we can rock and roll trying to take over the world. And I should totally borrow the Pinky and the Brain thing. When I'm about to play Risk, I should be like, what do I do every night? Guys, I know what we need to do tonight. And then you guys can go, what do we need to do tonight? What do we do every night? Try to take over the world with Risk. Okay. Frank said, I was checking the mail. Now I'm cooking chicken. I hope that's a euphemism for just being awesome. It's like, how's your art going? I am cooking some chicken. But I think you're actually cooking chicken, which is pretty cool. All right. Guys, here is the trailer. And then we're going to call it on this page because there's no way I'm getting past 3 panels. But I like how these 3 are coming out. So, again, that's a good thing. That's been my measure with this book, is like working speedily as possible, but not accepting mediocre, but also not pushing it to the point of absurdity. So it's a weird thing. Okay, guys, here is the trailer. Oh, wait, before I push it, there's you. I know you didn't hit like. Hit it. Okay, cool. All right, now we'll play... now we'll play 2 stories trailer. Wait, you know what? Let's play this instead. Okay, we'll play
Hi,
this.
my name is Phil Chandler. I'm a freelance artist, illustrator, and cartoonist. Today, though, however, I want to tell you about a graphic novel I picked up recently called Jacob's Apartment. This book was both written and beautifully illustrated by Joshua Kemble. It is the story of a doomed romance that causes the main character to question his beliefs and his faith, while he's also going through other tragedies in his life. Every page has been illustrated by hand and digitally colored with painstaking detail. It is an emotional story that causes you to think and even question things in your own life. And while the story is a tragedy, it is one that I was completely entertained by and I highly recommend. You can currently find this on Amazon or even check in with your local bookstore and see if you can order it. And while you're at it, you can also check out my Instagram at Phil Chandler Arts and also my YouTube channel by the same name, Phil Chandler Arts. And go buy Jacob's Apartment.
Sorry, and we're gonna play one more trailer while I get everything set up. We're almost there. So we'll play this one. So we heard from Philip. Now let's hear from Christopher.
Hi, my name's Chris and I like comics. I want to talk about this comic for a second here. I just got this in. I ordered it direct from my local comic shop through Diamond Distributing. It's Joshua Kemble's Jacob's Apartment. I really enjoyed this book. There's all kinds of comics out there, let's be honest. There's fun comics, there's superhero comics, there's young adult comics, there's adventure comics for kids. There's so many different things on the planet. But there's also an entire subgenre of alternative books. Real life, real world depictions in comic book form. Situations that happen to each and every one of us. And this is a fine example of that. If you get a chance, order this book from your local comic shop. You won't be disappointed. I can't sing its praises high enough. Okay? Check it out. Jacob's Apartment by Joshua Kemble.
All right, guys. What is this? The Risk menu. We're going to take over the world before we go to bed. Or we're going to fail at it epically. And that's how we approach art. That's how I approach Risk. I'm either going to fail epically or I'm going to win. I don't like the half measures. Okay. Let's do this. This is Risk. I've been on a jam lately where I've been playing progressive rather than fixed. See if there is a progressive game. That's looking pretty good. Let's join this one. It's already filling up, which is good. So we just need 2 more players and then we'll be good to go. The risk with playing Risk is every once in a while there's collaborators online. There's cheaters in some of these games. Collaboration in Risk is like if you go in knowing you're going to team with somebody and you're not strategically making that decision during the game. Because that makes it an impossible game. If like 2 people go into Risk being like, we're going to be a team, and we're going to go till the end, you're pretty much guaranteeing that you're going to win that game. But Risk can be a lot of fun. The app is really good. It's very responsive. This room is not filling up, so we might have to find a different one. We'll see if 2 players join us in any second. Frank said, I got new glasses yesterday, new frames, some lenses. I was able to get some drawing done, nothing big, but just some mimic dice. It looks like this game is actually decreasing. Oh, there we go. Okay, we just need 1 more player. Frank said that's how I approach my dating life. It's either an epic win or an epic fail. Everything I do is epic. That's right. It's epically so. So I'm an expert. The highest rank I've attained on here before was master. My attempt here is a long-term goal of trying to become a grandmaster at playing Risk. If you haven't yet played Risk, I encourage you to give it a shot and try it. It's a lot of fun. I find that it's really centering and interesting, and the strategy of it. When I do streams, I like to talk through what I'm thinking on it as much as I can. And also, I think since it's a journey I'm on, it's fun to bring you guys along. You can root for me or to succeed or fail, whichever route. If you notice that, like, if you have played this app and you notice that I have settings a little different, where like right now I'm black and I have like my little shape, but you'll notice there's little shapes with each number. That is a setting that you can do for color blindness. I am not colorblind, but I find that having the shapes as well as the numbers really helps me orient the map. This is progressive. So the game starts at, like, every time you take a territory, right? At the end of your turn, you earn a card. When you've closed a continent, you earn a troop bonus for each continent that you have. When you cash in your cards, you get a troop bonus. In fixed, that is a set troop bonus depending on the amount of cards you have. In progressive, it is a sliding scale of bonuses that exponentially grows as the game continues. So it starts kind of slow, and then your goal is to kind of keep your stack and get to the point where you're getting to this perfect point of exponential growth where you can start attacking and clearing out the board. It's a really fascinating version of Risk. And my favorite thus far has been fixed, which is the one where you have the kind of set bonuses. That might be overextending, by the way. I think I overextended. That might cost me the game, that 1 extra hit that I took. But I wanted to consolidate those 2. And in doing so, I actually cost myself too many troops this early in the game. So your goal is to like try to get a big stack and then hang in there till the big bonuses. But I do like that I have a 6 and a 5. I think that 5 in Australia is going to get cleared out. Blue is like going wacky. I think blue wants to cost me a lot of troops. I think blue might have eyes on taking me out of the game at some point. You'll notice people aren't closing territories as quickly as they do in fixed. And that is partially because it's less about territories. Progressive is like 99% about cards. It's about retaining your stacks of troops and getting those bonuses and not turning in too early. You want to be the perfect timing of when you clear out the board. Pink is moving into Asia. It's interesting. I'm not getting a lot of easy consolidations of my troops, which is kind of frustrating. I would like to be in a position where I have a lot of ones in between my bigger stacks of troops. So what is happening right now is, okay, red's taking cards in North America. They're keeping their main stack in South. And purple is going to take Australia, or aim to take Australia, but take cards on the way. I think they're heading to try to take Australia. I think I will break through this too. I would like to. If it doesn't cost me, good. I got to consolidate my 3 over and make that an 8. My biggest threat right now would be purple. Let's see, who's the board lead? So currently, the person leading the board is blue. Blue has 30 troops. And that will possibly change. Blue is a pretty big threat, too, to be right below me. They're in pretty good kill position. The only thing that's going to protect me from blue completely annihilating me is that 5, which will probably get taken out in a turn or two by purple. By the way, for everybody who's hung out during the stream all the way to this point, I just want to reiterate how much I appreciate you guys and love that I can start working on art and I have a crew of people kind of with who have my back. That means a lot. It means a lot. As corny as that is, I love our little community. I love our inside jokes. I absolutely love this stream. It's one of my favorite things. And it actually makes the daunting task of doing a graphic novel much more fun. So thank you guys. Like, very selfishly, I thank you guys. Red is playing a weird game here. Red is trying to set up in a good kill position as well, which is a part of the tactic of the game. I'm trying to keep my eye on red. That 17 can very easily kind of start clearing out some of my stuff too. So I'm trying to make myself a little harder to kill, but I might have to do an early cash-in if I can. I can't. So I'm in pretty bad position here. I think blue actually wants to close out Africa. I also think blue has massive designs on taking me out, because they've been slowly carving at my ones like a little more than necessary. Frank said, did you hear about the latest controversy involving Hasbro's Wizards of the Coast? They sent the Pinkertons Tina YouTubers home, made his wife cry, and took some magic cards. I have no idea what that is. Who is the Pinkertons Tina YouTuber? Oh, I get it. So they sent unreleased cards. Yeah, that's crazy. That sounds like a bad move on their part of like sending something unreleased. I'm kind of happy with my position so far, but in this game, it's very possible that it might get wiped out pretty soon. 16 is not in a position to take me out. Red is playing really weird, really aggressive. It's very strange. I think red wants to take that 11, but I'm not sure why. Blue is mad. Pink is trying to encourage really bad play. It wasn't necessarily the best play there. Whoa, that looked like the worst roll in the world. Did that 17 just go? Oh my gosh, that looks brutal. Well, in that case, because of that, I think I'm going to consolidate. Should I make myself easier to kill? I think I do. Now let's see where we're at. So nobody's cashed in yet. So right now the bonuses will be like 4. Blue really has designs on trying to take me out of commission. So I'm kind of glad that red made that weird move to kind of tell blue to get the hell out of its way. Blue has designs on some kind of global domination. It's interesting. Purple, I feel really bad for. I have no idea. I thought they had like a 16 and it hit a 1 that took them from like 16 to 6, which is just crap luck. At this point, I think pink is going to take Australia entirely, but maybe they don't go the whole way. Maybe they wait for a card cash in. I like that they're letting my 5 out. I might let them have Australia. As you guys know, my position on Australia, I'm not a big fan. I think that red, okay, it'll be interesting to see what red's doing. They're playing very erratically. I'll be surprised if red wins this. They're being very aggressive. That can work. I have even had streams where I felt like a player was being too aggressive and yet they won. That is totally possible, but I would say they're playing more aggressively than I think you can sustain. I think that red eventually overplays their hand. Now they might take me out. Like red is a little dangerous because of that too, right? I think I have no choice but to get rid of the cards that are making me very attractive to kill. And I would like to move my 5 out, but freaking purple's 8 is sort of preventing that from happening. So instead, what I will do is consolidate my 10 with my 13. As tempting as it is to just go hard at purple, I will just lose that 5 if I have to. So purple now is daring. It's an interesting Australia no win strategy where purple, who's about to get completely destroyed, although they do have a card turn in. So if purple lasts to next turn, they'll have 8 extra troops. But purple is basically daring pink to take Australia. They're saying, go ahead, because that's going to cost you 5. And then you'll only have 10 troops. And then I'll cash in and have 16. And I'll come and take Australia. So now the 15 doesn't want to hit the 5 because the 8. That's a bad move on purple's part because it's being really hostile. And so now if pink is able, they're going to annihilate you. You've just made an enemy, purple. But in this game, it's not as political because it is very much about timing. And so making friends and enemies isn't quite as important. They were the ones that formed a lot of things we associate with law enforcement. They invented mugshots. Term private eye comes from them. Their logo is an all-seeing eye. They also are the title of the best Weezer album of all time. Weezer's Pinkerton is a freaking excellent album. Now purple's going to do some damage. I hope purple tries to clear pink because I don't think they can. They might, but I think they fail here, which is good for me. Is there anyone I can kill or should kill at this point? I don't like blue lining up to annihilate me. I really don't. This could be a two-step ending, guys. This goes one of two ways. I hope that purple does not suicide into pink. Or pink suicide into purple. Because that is just a loss for both of them. And while that would be cool, well, you know what? Actually, if anything, I hope that purple suicides into pink at this point. Does blue take me out? I don't think they can, but they could hit my stack and do some damage. They wouldn't get those cards though, which would be kind of silly. I also think blue has designs on making red pay. Because red did kind of make an enemy with that little taking their 5. Okay, so pink now is going to close Australia. Goodbye to my 5. This makes me extremely vulnerable. Luckily, I have a card turn. It also makes them extremely vulnerable because that's what purple's been waiting for. So if purple has a card cash in, pink's done. Like, pink is gone from the game this next turn. If purple doesn't have a card cash in, that might be good news for me. What I'm hoping is that purple will fail to clear out pink. And then I can come in and get their cards. But I don't think that happens. I think purple makes the kill pretty effectively. But I hope they fail at it because I'm next up. And they don't. Good job. They get a card turn in. What did they get? 15 troops. Very well played. However, blue will come and eat purple now. And them expending troops to kind of do this extra stuff is stupid. Because that's just making them more vulnerable to get eaten alive. How many troops does purple have? Let's see here. How many troops does red have? And how many cards? How many troops does blue have? I think we have to take purple out if we don't run out of time. We might run out of time because I started a little too late. I was considering it too much. I didn't see that purple had 5 freaking cards. So this is a rush to do. Do we make it? Do we fail? We'll see. Because that 5 card thing, you can't not take those 5 cards. Blue would have taken them. We have to kind of do it. This might kill us, but it's a worthwhile thing. For 5 cards, I'll do it. Now, blue might take me out now, but I think my card turn-in is well worth it. So now I have 25 troops. So pretty much it cost me about the same to do that. I don't think I have enough. Is 26 enough? No, I don't have enough to go on a rampage and kill anyone else. So what we'll do is instead we'll go ahead and move our troops back. Now, that 30 can still go into my 25, but I'm in pretty good position. And we took purple out of the game, which was kind of good. Frank said, I did hear that too. I've been watching many RPG YouTubers, and one of them made that reference. Nice. Yeah, I wonder if RPG YouTubing is pretty cool. I'm sure that it is. It's funny, I've never even really watched a lot of gaming stuff. There's a couple political commentators that I watch that do gaming as well. But I usually watch them for like debates and stuff like that. But ever since getting into Risk, I will watch Risk streamers because it's interesting. Red might win this game. So this might be Red's kill shot because I don't have a card turn in. So I think Red takes this game. So Red played really aggressively and successfully, which I've mentioned you can do on this game. I don't have my 24 met with my 11. So at this point, that 35 comes, slams in my 24. Board is cleared. Game over. If they play it right. 69 troops. Before their cash in, yeah, they win this game. But it was well played, and I came in second. I feel good about that. Frank was saying, down with purple. I love it. Oh, they're going to do the long game. Interesting. So they're going to drag it out. So they're going to try to put me in a position where I cannot get cards, and they're going to be effective at it. This is a strategy. It's basically card blocking. It's a risky strategy. They could actually have won the game right now without having to do the slow play. So this still gives me a potential chance. Not really, because they're going to get like 26 cards for holding that much territory. And I don't have a card turn in, which is really a shame. I think I'm going to try to break through this 10 just because that's my best bet. So we'll do the slow roll. Hopefully we get good rolls and good odds. That was not a good roll or good odds. But sometimes you can luck out doing this, and maybe it breaks through their territory and gets me a card. Because all I need is one card. I mean, I will die next turn, but I would like a card. I think I'm dead. Yeah. So I die pretty brutally. End attack phase, and we'll fortify here. Yeah, because we can't achieve a card. So at this point, game over. Unless they continue to play kind of foolishly. This does seem like a slow kill kind of player, which is a little surprising. Like, you don't have to approach this point in the game that slowly. But I'm more than happy if they want to do that. So what they'll do now is like possibly consolidate. It's just a weird play. Yeah. So what they're going to do is move the 35. Oh, they're just going to card block even more. I mean, this is an assured way to win, but it's unnecessary. They could actually win. They could have won about 4 turns ago. So at this point, the game's over, but I always fight till the end. That's one of my favorite things to do. I think it's kind of lame to just quit when you know you've lost. You got to be a good sport. And we'll let them annihilate us. But we did well. We came in second. Hopefully this player can just chill and take me out. Sometimes these players like to move in very slow ways. I'm going to just do a little wah. I'm going to make some memes. Good game. And give them a thumbs up. Boom. Okay. Well played game. Let's see what the ranking of everybody was. I lost my hat and my skull because I'm a cowboy zombie character. Okay. That's good. I feel a little better. That was an expert, which is good. So we're peers technically. That's good. It would have been embarrassing to kind of lose to somebody lower ranked, although I have done that before. So that'll do it. That's our risk game for the night. I think we'll retain our status. And we will get closer to expert next time. So I'll spin that dice, spin my helmet here, and then we're going to call it a night. Thank you to everybody who's watched this. If you haven't yet, hit subscribe, hit the bell so you get notifications when we're about to go live. I will be working more on this comic page. We'll go now back to the comic page. I'll be working more on this tomorrow. So if you want to see how this thing evolves, check it out tomorrow. We'll tone the rest of that. Frank said, at least you didn't lose your rank. You're right. And again, like, I am weird and obnoxious and stubborn, and I will probably keep playing even if I got ranked down back to like beginner or even novice or something. It's just a fun thing that I enjoy doing, and it's a goal. So, guys, you're awesome. I hope you have a creative night, and I hope that, I hope this was entertaining for you. Let me know in the comments section if you're watching this after the fact. Let me know what you think about us doing a deep dive and watching a biography or a YouTube video that talks about Richard Simmons' career, because I think that would be hilarious and interesting and possibly meaningful. Who knows? All right. Have a good night, guys. Rock some comics, and I will see you on the next live stream. Boom.